they find that it's not as easy as they thought it might be. They struggle to maintain the grades that they arrived with. It's a real jump, isn't it?
It's not just something that you can get through one night before the exams. The one key word for me is consistency.
In the DP program, we're actually looking at how did you get that right answer? How do you justify the answer that you've got? You're not just writing an answer, you're writing why. That's a risk. They're not easier.
You students cannot afford long periods of disengagement and then suddenly catch up later.
Being ready for that transition is what we're aiming to support people through today.
So good evening once again, everyone, and welcome to today's session, Entering DP with Confidence, Academics, Balance and Beyond. Thank you so much for joining us today. And for those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Vrinda Bhandari and I head the International Curriculum Academics team at Sparkl. Over the last decade, I've worked extensively with IB and IGCSE students across schools, including Pathways World School, DPS International, and the British School. And today, my work focuses on curriculum alignment, academic quality, teacher development, and helping students transition more confidently into international curricula. And I'm especially excited because I'm joined by someone who brings an incredibly global perspective to this conversation. Mr. Matthew Raggett. He's the director of Thuringia International School in Germany and was the former headmaster of the Doon School in Dehradun. And he's the head of academic council at Sparkl. Matthew has worked with students and schools across multiple educational systems, and I genuinely believe there are very few people better positioned to discuss what students actually need before beginning DP. Welcome, Matthew, and thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome, Vrinda. It's lovely to work again with you and to be sharing this 1 month long DP Bridge program that we've created for students who are starting the DP this year.
Yes. So before we begin, I would just like to start with a poll to understand our audience better and just to see who's joining us in the audience today. We've launched a poll. If you could just answer. All right, thank you so much. So, Matthew, we have a lot of students who are preparing for DP. And then we do have some parents, teachers, and some people who are just exploring IB options. So thank you so much. And since we have a lot of students, I think our second poll will also be very, very important now because we want to also understand which curriculum are you coming from. So we'll just launch a second poll for everyone. I can see the numbers move very interestingly. So, all right. So we have a lot of, a similar number of CBSE, or rather a bigger number of CBSE students, and MYP, some from IGCSE. All right. We do have some from other curricula. So I think it's going to be helpful for everyone. And thank you for letting us know that. All right, so before we begin, let me quickly walk everyone through what we will be covering today. We'll start by understanding what actually changes when students move into the IB Diploma Programme and why the transition often feels much bigger than expected. We'll then discuss some of the most common academic and skill gaps students face while moving from CBSE, IGCSE, or MYP or any other curricula into the DP. We'll also talk about habits, routines, and mindset shifts that usually help students adjust more confidently during the first few months of the diploma program. And finally, towards the end, we'll tell you how Sparkl's pre-DP Bridge program is designed to help students prepare for this transition in a more structured and guided way. So with that, let's begin with probably the most important question of today's session. So, Matthew, what actually makes the DP feel so different from everything that the students have experienced before?
Right, yeah, I think it's a real jump, isn't it? And even those students who've done the MYP, they've probably just finished their personal project. They know what an interdisciplinary unit is, but there are still things that are going to be new to them. And it's really that expectation that students find difficult sometimes, making that transition, because they imagine that they're going to come along with their experience of the 10th grade, whatever program they've done, and they may have worked very hard. They may have learned over the last 5 years how to do well in school. And then they find that it's not as easy as they thought it might be. They struggle to maintain the grades that they arrived with. And just realizing that actually that is how it works. There's a process here, and you're going to be invited to do things in a different way, which you're not an expert at yet. And you know, you've done 5 years of this one program. Now you're going to do something else for 2 years. That's quite a tight time in which to adopt something completely new. And being ready for that transition is what we're aiming to support people through today. What did you find different? I mean, you've taught this as well. You and I are both experienced teachers in this program. What did you find different?
So I think the one key word for me is consistency. It matters throughout the program, and it's not just something that you can get through one night before the exams. Since we have a lot of students, you can't pull on one-nighters and finish work. So it's a whole journey that you'll be going through, as opposed to you having to, getting things done very, very quickly.
I think it comes as a shock as well that a lot of students believe that getting the right answer is the important thing. Whereas in the DP program, we're actually looking at how did you get that right answer? How do you justify the answer that you've got? And what are your reflections about the way in which that answer has an impact on the world around us?
Yes. So we will talk about how DP is very different, and about all the assessments and the kind of questions that students will face. But before we talk about all of that, I think it's important to understand what is the IB diploma, what is the structure of the IB diploma program, because for many students, they initially see DP as only just, 6 subjects. But the program, we know, is designed very, very differently. So Matthew, can you just walk us through the subjects and the core of the DP?
Certainly. So as you said, 6 subjects. 3 of these subjects we choose at higher level, 3 at standard level. And that's not about difficulty. That's about the amount of time that we spend in each of those subjects, and in the way that they're assessed. Everybody has to take 2 languages in the diploma program, and that can be a mother tongue and a foreign language, or it can be 2 mother tongues that we take. So in my school in Germany, all of the students take German and English as their 2 subjects. And we're looking at not only language, but literature too. And really not just sort of learning what the grammar rules are and learning what a poem is telling us, but actually looking at the way that language and writing is used in the real world out there. We'll look at some examples later. Everybody has to choose a subject from the social studies group, which is called Individuals and Societies. So we've got history and geography in there, but also things like economics, business management, psychology, anthropology as well. Everybody has to do a science. If you're going to study engineering or medicine, you're going to look at 2 sciences, I would imagine. And everybody has to do mathematics. And there are different levels of mathematics, and there's subjects, a choice of whether you do more applications based or whether you do more sort of investigations and approaches based. And then we've got this subject at the end here, which is called the arts. It's a brilliant subject for people who love perhaps visual arts or film or theatre, because it's 100% coursework. There's no exam in that subject. But it's also the only subject area that you can drop to do a second science or to do a second individual and society subject. So those are the subjects. But we're also doing something called Theory of Knowledge, which is a program where we look at how we know what we know in those subject areas. We do an extended essay, which is a little bit like the personal project at NYP, which is an original piece of research. And then we do this creativity, activity, and service program, where we are looking at the impact that we can have on our communities by giving our time and energy to them. It's not assessed, but it's recorded and reflected on. And those 3 core elements are as important as those subjects. If you don't pass those core elements, you don't pass your diploma program. Yeah, it's just like those subjects.
Yes. So for me, I think the core becomes more overwhelming for students is what I've seen, because they're not generally used to long-term independent work. And, it's not easy to write a piece of work in math or science or, even languages for that matter. So a lot of research, reflection, presentations, deadlines, all of that I feel becomes really overwhelming for students.
Yeah, and the bulk of that work for the extended essay is done over the summer break between
Yeah.
the first and the second year. So you've got your mentor, you've got a teacher guiding you, but actually you're really having to put that work in. And I think we'll talk later on about the way in which we need to learn to manage time and our approach to deadlines, which is start now rather than start when they arrive.
Yes. And just one more thing, Matthew, what do you think, students tend to underestimate which subject the most out of these?
Well, I think what students often do is they think higher levels are harder, and then they think the standards are easier, so I'll put less into them. And that's a risk, because you do have to put a lot of thought into your standards as well. They're not easier. And often having to do this range of subjects. I mean, if you did A levels, you might only do 3 subjects. Now you're having to do a package of subjects. Sometimes it becomes too easy to make a choice about what you think matters and what matters less when they all matter.
Absolutely. And just one thing to add, because we do have a lot of CBSE students. Uh, I have also been from CBSE, and I always thought, English was something I never needed to study. And I could just read or not read even and just go into my exam and I would score well. So I have seen a lot of students struggle with English, and despite being comfortable in math and sciences, I feel English is something that is that students consider as a first language, but they don't score as high as they expect being the first language.
Right. One of the learner profiles for the IB is communication. And all of these areas require us to articulate our thoughts on paper. So writing is about thinking out loud. And we have to do that in all of our subjects, in all of the internal assessment for these. And certainly if you've done CBSE, the language, the English is very, very different. You're not being asked, what's wrong with this sentence, or where was Romeo standing when, or, when something like that happened. You're being asked to explain why you think something. You're being asked to evaluate what's been going on in the page and to justify your beliefs. And that's a challenge. Yeah. You're not just writing an answer, you're writing why.
Definitely. And it gets, I think, quite uncomfortable to think in an unconventional direction with, and, when you're not used to doing that. So, how does assessment in DP vary? And, what are the kind of questions that students get?
So I think students who've done the MYP along the way have been used to some coursework. Also within some of the IGCSE, perhaps if you've done global perspectives, you'll be used to a more collaborative way of working together, inquiring and actually reflecting on what you've learned and putting that all down. You're going to have internal assessment for all of the subject areas that you do. That's going to be marked by your teacher according to the IB rubric, which is a guide on how you mark and what you award marks for. But even your teacher's marking is moderated by the IB. So the IB organization is really checking, is everyone working to the same set of standards? And we're looking at the same indicators for proficiency in this coursework. It's a wonderful thing to have 20% of your marks before you go into an exam. That's really reassuring. And you can get a lot of help and feedback, but you also have to take the help and feedback and take that guidance so that when you do go into your exams, you are as well prepared as you can be. You've put there at the end the DP score out of a total of 45 points. So each subject you can get up to 7 points for. So 6 sevens are 42, and then you've got 3 bonus points for your TOK, Theory of Knowledge, and your extended essay. Those bonus points can make the difference between getting what you're hoping for and not quite making it. So again, putting in the work consistently and through all subject areas matters. You can't fail one subject and hope the other subjects will carry you through, because you have to score 12 points in your higher levels. If you get a 3 for one, you need to get a 5 for another, but you can only drop to 1 3. So it's, it really is a package that you're working towards, which is also what you're doing at university. It's what we do in life. We're always working on a number of things at one time and trying to meet a set of criteria.
Yes, and as Matthew just said, that there is coursework, there is internal assessment. So assessments are not concentrated only at the end, which means that you students cannot afford long periods of disengagement and then suddenly catch up later. That doesn't happen.
One of the bits of advice that our graduating students give our grade 10s before they come in is you need to listen when your teachers tell you when you need to be starting, where you should be now, because a mistake that many of them make is they think that they know better and that they can do it as they get closer to the end. That is not how successful students work. Yeah.
Yes, I have a very typical dialogue of telling, I keep telling my students, don't pile up your work. And a lot of them still end up piling up their work, and then they can never get to the bottom of the pile.
Right. And it's, learning to negotiate deadlines is not a very useful skill, honestly. And it won't be very useful in real life. Other people will meet those deadlines if you don't. Yeah. So working towards those deadlines from today is actually how to go about things. And schools help you with that. They publish assessment calendars. So we, on the first week of grade 11 for our new IB DP students, we give them a 2-year calendar, and it has everything on it. And we give it to their parents as well, because it's as valuable as the timetable. You need to know what your kids are doing that day, so you can talk to them about it. You need to know when their assessments are so that you help them meet those deadlines.
True, and that is important. Now, moving on to, I think, one of the most important part of today's discussion, Matthew, because students entering DP, they are not coming from the same background. We know we already have a very diverse background in the audience, some from IGCSE, CBSE, MYP. But what's interesting is that each curriculum prepares students differently, and students often carry different strengths and challenges into DP. So, what differences do you usually notice in the way students from different curricula adjust to DP?
Yeah, and this is really why we've put together this month-long DP Bridge program, because everyone arrives with some skills that are useful, but we want to try and help make sure that everyone is ready to start. The rubber hits the road on that first day. You are moving at a pace. You are noticing things, listening, hearing things that are going to help you succeed. So we know that students have been used to delivering answers and responses in a particular way. You're going to be asked to do that differently now. You're going to be asked to learn a new set of criteria for what success looks like. You're going to have to learn a new set of vocabulary, because each subject area has what's called a set of command terms. And those are the clues about what you need to do. So the difference between stating something, calculating something, explaining something, and justifying it is what you have to learn to do on paper in your new subject areas. You probably, even within the MYP, you've been used to working with criteria, but you probably haven't been used to quite a nuanced difference between the types of questions you're being asked. And that's a skill that you're going to have to develop. You're also going to have to develop, I think, hugely that time management. You've got the clock and the calendar in there. Within the MYP, you've been doing interdisciplinary units. You've probably had one a year. you've done a personal project, that's one thing. You're going to have several things like that running at one time now, and making sure that you are always putting some energy in as you go along is really going to matter. Just a note for everyone: if you really believe that you don't have anything to do today, you've missed something, because you do have something to do. And it might just be reading, it might be journaling and putting some thoughts down on paper, but you have something to do. It's a 2-year project, and it's the basis of your success at the end of the day.
Yes, so the pace, workload, expectations, they're all going to change.
They will. I think the struggle is that again, it's taking my grades, which I was very happy with at the end of grade 10, and believing that I will maintain that, because you're not maintaining something. You are starting something new. And when you start something new, you're not going to be at the highest achievement level because you haven't got there yet. You've not practiced it yet. So be ready for a dip. And that dip's not a problem. It's only a problem if it remains. Yeah. But don't lose your motivation just because I'm not getting, in my first semester report, what I got in my last semester report of grade 10, because you're doing completely new things now in some of these subjects.
That is very true. And I'll ask you one more question, I think, on behalf of our MYP students, because they are coming from the IB curriculum and moving on to another IB curriculum. So for them, how do you think the shift is? And is it as big a shift as it is for the other curricula?
Well, I think that actually it could be, because in some ways, if you've done CBSE, you've probably been drilled a lot more in some content. Yeah. IGCSE as well, you've been drilled a bit more in content than in the MYP. There's no admission criteria onto the DP program. Schools can choose to select people, but there's no knowledge you need to come with. So the sudden increase in content can be a bit of a challenge. If I think about my MYP science students, they're very good at reading scientific data, using articles, answering questions about the sustainability and impact of certain things. But they haven't been used to doing so much content as you have to at the start of the physics course in DP, where you are learning all of your mechanics. And you're doing a lot of mathematics in your physics there, because it's the foundation that you're going to need to go on and look at how energy behaves in all these other areas of physics. So that can be quite a step up.
Yes. And that also, I would say, mean that DP is not academically harder or, more depth in content or more challenging in that sense, but it does require a completely different set of skills. And there are certain skill gaps that we observe, if students are moving from a grade 10 to 11. So, Matthew, what do you think those skill gaps are, and how students can fill those skill gaps?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big gaps, if you've come from a CBSE or an ICSE curriculum, one of your gaps is that you've done a lot of memorization. You're really good at knowing stuff, but really understanding the applications of things is something that you're going to have to work on. Perhaps what you need to do there is read around the subject area. So you're not reading textbooks. You need to be reading and understanding more about how science works and what chemists do in the real world. In terms of writing things down, you've been used to writing answers rather than explanations and justifications. And even, I think the skill of reflecting is something that you've developed quite well in the MYP, but not so much in IGCSE or CBSE. And you are going to be invited to reflect on your learning, how you would do that differently. I mean, it's a great realization that if I think of maths investigations or science internal assessments, you don't even have to get the right answers out of your investigation. The experiment can go wrong, and you can still learn an awful lot about how I would do that next time, why it went wrong, and what I can do differently. So, being prepared to make mistakes and learn is a skill that you probably haven't developed in any of the programs,
Yes.
that you've been involved
So,
in so far.
just to add, because a lot of almost everyone uses AI and information is available, so it's your reflection, your analysis, your inferences that are going to matter more than information that you're putting into your work.
Right. I mean, facts and the stuff you can look up in a data book. So in maths and sciences, you get given all of those equations. You get given all those those structures and molecules. You get given those constants. You don't have to remember them. What you have to know is, how do I use these to solve real world problems? And also, how do I make connections, for example, from what I'm doing in mathematics to what I then do in physics to what I then see in economics? Because, the way that I understand graphs is going to help all of those subjects. But I forget to do that often in my sort of grade 10 years. You're not asked to make those connections so easily.
Yes, and we've looked at the skills and you just discussed. So honestly, I feel that students who begin building these skills early, they usually gain a massive advantage during the first year of DP. And that's often the difference between students who spend the first few months constantly trying to catch up and students who enter the program already feeling confident and in control.
Yeah,
So
there's a difference, isn't there? What are the successful students do really well? I mean, that's the sort of thing that we're trying to help prepare students for with this bridge program.
yes, yes, certainly. And another misconception students often have is that, again, DP is simply harder content. But very often, the challenge is actually the nature of questioning. So, we did discuss the assessments. We'll have, internal assessments will have a certain weightage, external assessments will have a certain weightage. But, Matthew, what are the kinds of questions that students encounter in DP, and how can they begin preparing early for that style of thinking?
Yeah, I mean, you've put an example question at the bottom of that slide. To what
Yeah.
extent do urbanization and government policies contribute to to environmental sustainability? Justify your answer with examples. I mean, I think that's a high order of thinking that is being required here. And you are being asked to do that in words, in writing. At the moment, it's still on an exam paper. In a few years, we'll be actually typing. If you've done MYPE assessments, you know that you're doing this online, but it's all using language. So that's really what we're being required to do, and that's what's demanded of us. Data, you've got there for science and mathematics, data analysis and applying concepts to unfamiliar situations. So I think that with some of the other curriculum in the past, we've been solving problems that we already know the answer to, but we've been learning, how do I find the answer to this problem? What you're going to be asked to do in the DP and in the real world is look at problems that, first of all, you don't know the answer to. And then secondly, maybe no one knows the answer to, but you're going to talk about why you think in a particular way and why you think this solution might be better than that solution. So a lot of questions start with the words, to what extent? And then you really have to go to town on explaining your thinking.
Yes. So the process matters a lot, and it's not just that one final answer.
I think also a skill for our students that we will help them develop with the bridge program is thinking of their own questions. So
Yes.
in a classroom, 60% of the learning happens between students because of what they bring. So teachers, they plan a lesson, they've got examples to share and show, but students who develop a really good habit of asking good questions help move everybody's learning forward. And again, if you're a team member in the real world, in some, an engineering firm, you want the people who are asking the good questions. These are the people who make a difference and cause everybody to change their thinking.
Yes, that is a very important skill that both teachers and students have and develop further during the course of the diploma program. So moving on, and Now we've discussed the challenges, and now the next question that we have is, what do students who adjust well to DP usually do differently before the program even begins? So,
Yeah, so look at that. The first one that you've put there is builds routines before the DP starts. Now, you're going to be enjoying the nicest, longest summer holiday between the 10th and the 11th class. And I realized that the sound of doing a bridge course you might think, oh gosh, in my holiday. That's why we've made it part-time for a month so that you can fit other things around it. But doing something in that holiday to prepare yourself so that your routines are established. You've only got 2 years for this, less than that. You've got 18 months really. So hitting the ground running is really important, and we're going to help you do that. But parents who are watching as well, you can help students do that. And I know we'll look at that in a bit more detail. But some of these key things before you start, it's not about sharpening your pencils and making sure you've got a nice notebook. It's about, have you slept properly? Are you eating well? Are you getting exercise and fresh air? And do you have social interaction every day that isn't through a screen? These are the kind of things that lead people to be happy and ready before you actually start. Yeah. These are routines to develop so that we can then strengthen the foundations of learning.
yes. And I think you and I have seen every year that students entering the DP are constantly overwhelmed within the first few months because too many things happening, all happening at once. While others, they settle in much more confidently and steadily.
I think there's an expert. When I look at my most successful students in grade 11, they know that it's going to be hard work. That's important to realize. What are you trying to do? Some of you are trying to get into really selective universities. That's difficult. Yeah. And then those students have thought, what am I prepared to sacrifice? How hard am I prepared to work in order to do this? Because you can't necessarily do everything. So therefore, where are you going to prioritize? And if you are able to prioritize some time each day to work on what you know is coming up, that's going to lead you to be successful. If you're running and struggling to fit everything in, and dear parents, please don't overload your students with other things that you want them to be doing. This is a full-time job. Yeah. It's a full-time job at school. It's a full-time job with getting the support that they need, that we're helping to provide as well. You can't manage everything. So what are you prepared to also give up a little?
Yes. And in such case, I honestly feel that preparation creates a huge difference because students who will begin to build routines, have some stronger foundations in the academics, they will have some reading habits, and get into workload management early. I feel they enter DP with more stability and more preparation.
Yeah, and I think that you mentioned reading habits just there. The students who I think are most successful in sciences, and when I think of economics, business management, they change what they're reading and listening to. So a lot of kids have found podcasts that they love. There are really good economics podcasts. There are really good books to read around that subject. So you're not reading textbooks, you're reading about that subject. How does that subject work? What are the people who are doing well in that subject learning and finding? Yeah. Most Nobel Prize winners write books. Yeah. You can read about what they do and how they think and how science works. It's a good change to make.
That's a great idea. So I hope students have made a note of some of these. And just to sum up, I'll just read out the last line that we have on this slide, that the DP is a marathon, it is not a sprint, and what you do early sets the tone for everything that follows.
Yep. And I'm thinking about a couple of my best students this year who will be in danger of getting 45 points. When it came to the end, they were the most relaxed people ahead of their exams because they've done the work consistently. They know what's coming, and it's a great position to be in.
definitely. And of course, this transition is not only about students. Parents play an extremely important role during that phase. So, Matthew, how can parents support students through the DP transition without unintentionally adding more pressure?
Yeah, it's an important one, isn't it? This because we want our children to succeed, and I imagine parents watching this and parents putting their children into a school that offers the DP program. They've thought a lot about what they're doing and why, but it's important to realize that you're not buying an outcome. What you're doing is you're buying an opportunity for your child. And again, with Sparkl, it's an opportunity. We're here to support your children. They do have to do the work, though. It's rather like gym membership. You can buy a gym card, but you don't get a six pack. You actually have to do the work. And I think parents have to create that environment in which the work can happen. Yeah. And it's really important as well. Again, you have that parenting role of, are they sleeping? Are they eating? Are they socializing with people, not on a screen, but in reality? And are they getting exercise? Those things are going to really, really help your child perform. And then once those things are in place, and once you've got to make sure your child knows that you love them no matter what. It's not contingent on how they do at school. Then you talk to them about what they're learning. What were they surprised by at school? What was interesting today? What connections did they make? What did they see in the real world that's reflected in what they do at school? These are good questions because they lead to a conversation rather than just a single word answer.
Yes, I also have had a lot of parents who have been more worried about grades than the students themselves because they come saying that my child scored a 7 in grade 10 or an A star in grade 10, but the grades have now come down. And it is very difficult to explain to parents that it's okay. We will have to allow them to make their mistakes and get back on track.
Yeah, they're starting something new. Just like when we move to a new job, we don't know everything yet. When we move to a new country or city, we don't know everything yet. And to expect that is unreasonable. And actually, that expectation puts a lot of pressure onto students because you haven't understood the process.
I agree with that. It's just more encouragement, more structure, and students will gradually become independent learners. They'll get there.
Yeah, and I think that it's also really important. Please, as parents, please don't encourage your children to not go into school on a day when they don't feel like going to school or where they think there's too much building up, because that'll make it worse. Please don't think that you can negotiate deadlines that a school sets, because of course, whilst you want to do everything to support your child, that isn't helpful. You're actually going to make things worse. So you're there as their cheerleader and their support, but you're also there as the person to remind them of how life works and what reality is.
Yes, certainly. And we have discussed a lot of challenges and how the transition looks like, what the DP entails. Now, coming on to our most obvious question, that can students actually prepare for these expectations before the DP begins? So,
Right, and that's the point of our pre-DP bridge program at Sparkl, is that we know that they can prepare. We've seen our successful students do it. We've helped successful students do that in the past. And what we want to do is share the things that we've learned with students so that they don't have to spend so much time learning from the start of grade 11. They can be ready, tuned in, listening and thinking like a DP student from the first day. That's the point of this program.
yes, and we also aim for the students to become more confident, academically stronger, more organized, and just overall better prepared to step into the journey that they are about to undertake for the next 18 months.
That's it. So we're looking at these four aspects of building strong foundations developing critical thinking, and that's not just in our heads or spoken, it's on paper. It's being able to articulate for someone to read. We're going to strengthen academic skills by looking at some of those things we've chosen, which we know kids find hard to take from 10 into 11 with them. That's going to lead to a bit more success and just build confidence in that process and the journey.
Yes. Now let us walk everyone through the subjects and the structure of the program. This is going to be a month-long program, which I think will fit comfortably into everybody's schedule of holidays. So this will include the core focus areas will be math and English, which we know are mandatory subjects, along with TOK sessions. So it'll give you a head start into the world of TOK. We are also offering additional subjects, which are physics, chemistry, biology, economics, and business management. So I know most of you would have chosen your subjects already at school. So whatever subjects you choose, apart from the regular ones, of course, which you're supposed to take, you can include those in the bridge program.
So what's the bridge program look like? Have we got an idea of the times? Because that's what I'd be thinking about. How am I going to use my month in order to learn more? So what have we got here?
Yes, so this month vacation, this year vacation is going to be very, very important for you, because the next year is not going to be as easy as this one or as breezy as this one. So the course structure, we will start with a diagnostic assessment, and which will give us an idea into how you learn, where you are at with respect to the current grade level. And we will prepare a personalized learning plan for you, because that's the Sparkl philosophy, that one size fits one. So we will not, while the content is going to be, fixed in terms of what we want you to be able to be ready for when you start with the DP, but how you learn, at what pace you learn will be totally dependent on you. And we will have 2 classes in a week for each of the subjects. So over the span of 4 weeks, that is a month, we will have 8 math and 8 English classes and 2 TOK sessions spread across the month. In addition to that, of course, the optional subjects will also have 8 sessions in a week. These will also be, 8 sessions in a month, and these will also be 2 sessions in a week. So it's not your whole month that is going to get occupied, or your entire week or day. These are going to be 1 hour long sessions. And so about 18 sessions for the core, and every subject will have 8 additional hours in that month. The schedule will be as per your availability and as per our teachers' availability. All right, so here are some sample topics that we're going to do. So Matthew, would you like to take us through the sample topics and how they're important and relevant to DP?
Certainly. So what we've recognized that there are some areas where we think, yeah, that's a real challenge for our students. They haven't done enough work or thinking about that before they come into the DP. So, for example, English. One of the topics we're going to look at is the close reading of visual texts. Now, we're often used to reading a poem or a piece of a play or a book. But within English, there's so many ways in which language is used. The way that advertisers use language to manipulate and persuade is a very powerful use of language. So we're going to explore the ways in which language and visuals work together to exercise power, to share meaning with people, and develop the skills to analyze and then to articulate, to talk about how and why you can do this with language. In mathematics, we know that functions and graphs are a huge area, not just in maths, but also in physics, to some extent in chemistry, to an extent in economics as well, and even in psychology, when we're looking at analyzing experimental work. We know that people find it really hard sometimes to visualize and think about what functions and graphs show us and mean. So we're going to really dig into strengthening how people understand the properties of functions and the way we represent them. And then in things like physics, we're going to look at the real foundational elements that determine your success in the rest of it. And for physics, that's usually mechanics, forces and momentum. Physics is all about the way energy changes and moves in the universe, but we use mechanics to explain almost all aspects of that, including gas equations and including, projectile motion and even atomic and nuclear physics. If you don't understand that well, it's hard to keep catching up. So that's the foundation that we would be building in physics, for example. So there's three little insights into those programs, but we've really built an 8-program session for each of these subject areas that's going to help students be ready when they start and then thrive when they get into grade 11.
Yes, so these are all those topics which are like prerequisites for DP and also will help you for the entire course to come. So with that, we come to the end of our presentation and we can now open the floor for some questions. I can already see some questions in the chat. Matthew, I'm just going to ask you the first one. While the others can also please put in their questions in the chat and we'll pick them up. So Mahi asks, are DP exams taken through digital medium or on paper?
So at the moment, there is a pilot program for taking language exams on a computer. If anyone has done the MYPE assessments, they're really quite imaginative assessments. But for the DP, it's literally like taking the exam paper, but on a computer. Yeah? And it's going to be rolled out in the years to come that in each subject area, first of all, languages, then it's going to be in individuals and societies, then it's going to be in maths. And they're rolling this out over the next 5 years in those subject areas. And by the end of those 5 years, it will be normal to take exams on a computer. If I look at my children studying at universities, it's been normal for them to do their exams on a computer for a long time. Also, to do them at home with any resources that they want, because they're being asked interesting questions that you can't just look up the answers for.
Yes. So also just to add on, if you will be starting with your DP in 2026, by 2028, maybe 1 or 2 exams are going to be digital, not all of them. All right, next question, Matthew. What are the differences between the regular and non-regular diploma in terms of college acceptances? Other than modified coursework and exams, does it hold the same level of relevance as a regular diploma?
You're going to have to help me out there, Vrinda. What's a regular diploma compared to a...
From my understanding, I think the irregular diploma is where the student is doing all 3 sciences.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. No, there are also some, there are some students who also take 7 subjects. A third science or a third language in some cases too. I mean, for the university admissions, the admissions departments, they're really looking at a regular diploma. Anything else is just sort of extravagant. And in my experience as well, students who do 4 hires, which some schools allow, we allow it occasionally. For example, if you take higher level maths, we let some people take 3 hires because some people will choose to drop down from higher level maths because of the amount of content and how challenging they find it. It is a tough course, actually, higher level maths, isn't it?
Yes. So our next question, I think I'll skip one and go to the next one, which is relevant to what we just spoke about. Can we take 7 subjects in IBDP?
Well, yeah, okay. So I think we just answered that. It's possible, but it's really extravagant. And actually, if you're looking at, does it benefit you a lot in university admissions? I'd argue that there are other things that would benefit you a lot that are not taking a 7th subject. Sometimes students do it because they actually have 2 mother tongues and they have a foreign language. And then it's quite, it's just relatively easy to do that. Yeah. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone, actually, because of the pressure that you put on yourself doing it.
Yes. And I would also like to add that you end up compromising almost all your subjects in that case.
Yeah, it's a real challenge. you don't need to learn how to handle burnout between the ages of 16 and 18. Yeah,
Yes.
it's not recommended.
Okay, moving on to our next question. As a parent, I want to know, are there certain habits or behaviors in grade 10 that become red flags once students enter DP?
That's interesting. I mean, if you've successfully navigated grade 10, that there probably aren't many red flags. I think if you have got into a habit of using AI in a way that is not helping you learn, but is actually doing your thinking for you, you may not have shared that with anybody, and that would probably be a risk. And it's true that every bit of internal assessment that is submitted to the IB goes through screening software that is always being updated, that looks for comparison with other things that have been submitted, but also a statistical analysis for whether it's likely to be AI or not. And if that goes over a certain boundary, then a student may be asked to resubmit that work under exam conditions. So how have students been using AI to help themselves along the way will be an issue. I can't think of many others, though. Can you think of any others, Vrinda?
Not really. I think if students have been struggling to keep up with their work, so specifically again in MYP in terms of submissions and deadlines, I think that's going to be a really big red flag, and DP is going to be even more challenging.
Okay, yeah. So it doesn't get better. So if they've improved the way that they handle and cope with that, then that's great. If they haven't, if they're having stress and panic attacks, there's something about the environment and the pressure they're putting on themselves that is not going to improve in the DP. It's a challenge. I mean, one of the things that I know parents really, I suppose they worry about, they find it difficult, is this belief that if my child doesn't do this now, then they are falling behind compared to the rest of the world. Well, all they're doing is falling behind compared to what the neighbors telling you their kids are doing, honestly. And taking the time to do things properly. I think about my own kids. One of them spent 2 years working. Two of them spent 2 years working before going to college, because they didn't really know what they wanted to do. And the idea of starting something that they didn't really know whether it was the right thing didn't work for them. Now, they didn't fall behind in anything. In fact, they learned more stuff working than they probably would have done in 2 years at university. So that's an illusion. Yeah. Your kids need sometimes the time to figure things out.
They definitely do. We'll take on Kavya's question. Being a student of CBSE, shifting to IBDP, is it okay for my child to take a particular language as a subject when they've never learnt it before, or is it suggested not to?
Well, it's possible to take a new language, and that program is called the Ab Initio program, which means from scratch. So you could do German Ab Initio, having never done German before, but it's quite a challenging program. So you can do, a lot of students in the Indian context might do English and Hindi. They might do English and Urdu. They might do English and another Tamil, another language that they're used to. But yeah, think carefully about starting a language from scratch. Now, there are languages that do not have language B, which is foreign language, or language A exams that you can study as an individual student. So in my school, we don't have a Japanese language teacher, but we have students who are Japanese mother tongue, and they will do a Japanese program with a tutor externally that our teachers internally will act as mentors for. But that's also possible with language.
Okay, thank you for that. We have Abhishek's question, and we'll just take one more after this. Can you explain CAS and projects outside of studies which also get counted for the final assessment?
Okay, so the things that are outside of those 6 subjects, first of all, theory of knowledge. That's a class that you might have twice a week with a teacher. And in that class, you're looking at how do we know what we know in mathematics? How is mathematics different from science? How does mathematics, in maths, we assume certain things to be true. In science, we only assume things to be reasonable if there's evidence for them. We do experiments. We don't do experiments in history. This is why our subject areas are different. And then the students give an exhibition and they write an essay for that. And that gives up to 1.5 points out of those 3 bonus points. The extended essay, that's the research project. So students often do that in their favorite subject. So I might have done mine in physics, and I might have done an investigation into something that I have noticed, like the way that light shines and is reflected when the street lights are behind a wet tree. You get these beautiful circular patterns. I might investigate something about that. And I write an essay about it, and that's another 1.5 points. And the creativity, activity, and service, that's more like a journal that students keep of things that they do outside of school time. So they'll be volunteering somewhere. They will be taking action somewhere. They will be doing some sport somewhere. They'll be learning a new skill somehow. It might be knitting or crochet or cooking. And they keep a record of that, often online on a program like Manage Back or Toddle. But that isn't graded. It's just something that is stamped to say, yes, this has been done. If it hasn't been done, you won't get your diploma. But those are the 3 things outside of the subject areas.
Yes, so we'll just take one last question, Matthew, very quickly. Also in between, Dishita has one question about the pre-IB program. So Dishita, we'll reach out to you separately for that. And one last question from Shrikant, which is most students start focusing on applications for early action in universities, starting from the end of 11th grade. Does it hinder or hamper the overall progress in IBDP anyway? What is your advice?
Interesting. Well, I would say, does it hinder it? Yes, very much, actually. And what I've seen in the past is that students put so much time and energy into this. They work very, very hard to get their predicted grades. Then they put all their time and energy into getting into college. And then they don't do as well as they had thought they would because they have lost that energy and that time. And honestly, I've seen students applying to, dozens and dozens of colleges wanting, I'd like a complete set of Ivy offers, please. This doesn't make any sense. What is it that you really want? There's a bit of thought to go into that. I remember back in the day, I applied for 3 colleges. My daughter's just applied for 2. My son applied to 1 because that was where he knew he wanted to go to do this thing that he knew he wanted to do. It takes so much energy and time. And goodness me, if you're also paying for the support to do all of those things, you need, take a year off and do that when you've actually got the grades that are going to get you into the college you think you'd like to go to. Again, this illusion that you are falling behind if you're not doing it this year. Who are you falling behind compared to? Maybe your classmate might be somewhere else, but you can go there next year and be ready for it.
That's great advice, Matthew. Thank you. We will not be able to take up any more questions. We've already overshot time. So I'm writing, this is my number and my email ID actually. So if in case you have more questions, want to know more about our bridge program, please feel free to reach out to us and we will be very happy to help you. For our registered students, you can just drop in a message on your WhatsApp group. We'll reach out to you there. That's it from our side. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And Matthew, thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences throughout the session. And we really hope that today's discussion gave students and parents a clearer understanding of what the DP transition actually looks like and why early preparation can make such a meaningful difference. And
bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thank you once again. Thank you, everyone.